We're going to talk about dinosaurs tonight, as you will know, class number 8. And by the way, just in case I forget to later, I run out of time, next week is the week we will not be meeting. I will be out of town. My wife and I will be out of town next week, so we won't be meeting next week on the 19th. However, we will resume this class on class number 9 the following, that would be the 26th, I believe, that following Tuesday for the last 2 classes. Class number 8 already, it has absolutely flown by. Dinosaurs. Now, this particular subject is one of great interest, and it has gotten the attention of those that are in the religious world and those that are in the secular world, because one of the greatest ways to help kids learn or to teach children is to talk about something that they are what? Interested in. And so one of the greatest teaching tools you can use if you want to learn about something like evolution or something like the Bible, you can use dinosaurs, because kids absolutely eat that up. Even many adults, college students, teenagers, all ages, but especially little ones. Several years ago at a Christian Bible camp, there was 3 questions given to them, a little short questionnaire to ask them about dinosaurs. And they had multiple choice options, and they were asked how long ago dinosaurs walked the earth. Over 70% of all of those kids at this Christian camp, over 70% said that dinosaurs lived over 65 million years ago. That is what the young people are being taught, as you will know. In schools, they are absolutely being littered with this idea of evolution, and dinosaurs is one of the greatest ways, the easiest ways, to plant evolution in the minds of these young people. And as I mentioned, I believe probably in previous studies, one of the greatest ways to prevent people from believing, young ones from believing in creation, is to get them to buy into this 65 million year ago Earth. Because if you can get the young people to believe that Earth is that old, then when they hear things like Genesis 1 that says the Bible is, was created and this was nearly 6,000 years ago and not millions, there's a problem. They can't believe both. They've got to choose. And a lot of times they go with what they've been hearing over and over again in the school systems. All right, let me jump right into this. Let's talk about, did dinosaurs exist? How do we know for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years outside of the Bible, man had no idea that dinosaurs existed? Where in the world did dinosaurs come from? What make us even think that such a creature exists outside of the Bible? Archaeology, excellent. Archaeology, that's it, fossils. In fact, I'm going to show you a few pictures, and throughout this study I'd like to show you several, but there are things they call fossil graveyards that they have found in all 7 continents. There are fossil graveyards. In other words, there are locations that are littered that they found lots and lots of dinosaur fossils in, such as the one pictured above. I hope you can see some of these. Since you choose to sit in the back instead of the front, I keep reminding you of that. What does this look like to you? Fossilized what? Eggs. When I first saw this, it looked like almost like a paw print that was upside down or something, but that's exactly what that is. That's fossilized dinosaur eggs. Very interesting. Many of those have been found. Anybody want to take a guess what's fossilized there in the middle of that picture? Not a whole lot of these, but we have a few of them. What part of the dinosaur do you think that is? It's kind of hard to tell. What part of the dinosaur? You're close. What would be another very important organ centralized in every dinosaur? The heart. The heart. That is a fossilized heart. And they have found several of those as well of these dinosaurs. Just absolutely incredible. I'll just let you think about what that is for a minute. You probably know, right? I'll put that up there as a joke. But, that again, finding these fossilized parts of the dinosaur and even its excrements are very, very significant in teaching us about these creatures. And we know a lot about them just based upon the fossils. However, keep in mind that everything that we've depicted, all that the artists have done and the reconstructions of these fossils are our best educated guesses. We don't know for a fact exactly what these creatures looked like. And that's very important because Some of the things we're going to look at a bit later may deviate slightly from what we've drawn, but that doesn't necessarily mean that what we've drawn is accurate. But what they drew is accurate because they witnessed many of these creatures, as we're going to see. Where did this term dinosaur come from? It's an English term. When did this come into effect? When did we learn about these creatures? When was the first fossil found, in other words? Anyone know? How many years ago? It was in the 19th century, in 1822. A man by the name of Gideon Mantell and his wife Marianne in London. They were traveling. I don't know exactly the location that they found it. They were leaving London, England in particular, I should say, not necessarily London, but they were in England and traveling. He was a doctor to see a patient. His wife was walking and came across some rubble, some stone and rocks, and she found in there something that looked like a tooth. And it was a very, very large tooth. In 1825, about 3 years later, he named that tooth Iguanodon, as in orthodontist, don as in tooth, iguana tooth, because basically it was just like an iguana tooth, but it was about 10 times the size of an iguana tooth. And so this first creature was named Iguanodon, even before the term dinosaur was even coined. It was Richard Owen of the British Museum of Natural History about 2 decades later that actually coined the term dinosaur. What does dinosaur mean? Y'all know this one. Maybe some of the younger ones do. You learned it in school. Fearfully great what? Lizard. That's right. Fearfully great lizard. All right, that's not Bible there. That's just educated from school. You learn about those things. I know it's been a while. It's been a while for me too. But fearfully great lizard. That's what dinosaur means. That's all it is. Just giant reptiles, basically. But not all of them were huge. Some of them were rather small. But that first fossil was discovered in 1822. That is why, by the way, there's a picture of the iguanodon as we best can replicate it. That's why the word dinosaur is not found in the Bible. It is an English term, and it was coined well after versions such as the King James Version were written. There are terms in the Bible that could potentially be dinosaurs, and I believe that they are. We'll look at a bit later. But you're not going to see the word dinosaur. You're going to see other words that we'll address at the appropriate time. Now, I'm moving quickly, but I want to get to the evidence. But before we do, I want to mention this. If you were here, some of you were here several months ago in the congregation at services. We talked a little about this, and some of this you'll remember or recall, such as this. And then I've got some new material as well. But the books that these kids have in school, there's a lot of different books that they use. And here's one of the more popular ones that they have been using for years. And this is the very first page in this book. You can find it in a lot of libraries and things the kids will look at. If you can see that or read that very well, I'm going to underline a part here. But it reads, Earth has an incredibly long history as it is formed about 4.6 billion years ago. Geologists divide the passage of time since into eras. Dinosaurs lived in the Mesozoic era. Very significant. If you want to get anything across to a young person, if you want to get a major point from your book in their minds, where are you going to put it in that book? First page. Why would you put it on the first page? It's the first thing they're going to see. They may not read that whole book, but if they're kind of checking it out, they're going to read that first page. And the very first sentence says what? Earth was 4.6 billion years ago. That's what they want the kids to learn. That's all they really care about, is just getting that implanted in their minds. Coincidence? I think not. The very next page talks about these different periods again. If you can see that timeline, you have the Cretaceous period at the bottom, 144 to 65 million years ago. Humans, they believe, came in about 2 to 3 million years ago. The last dinosaurs died out 65 million years ago, and then humans came in about 2 or 3 million years ago. Right? It doesn't take much math to see that there are millions and millions, some 62 million years that separated the last dinosaur with the first human. If you believe in what they're teaching about dinosaurs in school, if you believe that man was separated that far, you cannot believe in Genesis chapter 1. You just can't do it. Because God made it clear, Moses made it clear by inspiration, that God created all of these animals on the 5th and 6th day, whether they were in the water or on the land. But this is what they're teaching them. And kids, again, over 70% of a camp just a few years ago said they believed dinosaurs were that old. Some of these things like the Wendy's cartons. Y'all ever remember, I don't know how far back Wendy's did this. Not that y'all are that old or it was that long ago, but did any of y'all get Happy Meals when you were growing up that had little puzzles and things like that on it, or crossword puzzles or little dinosaur facts and things like that? I certainly remember seeing those. I don't know if they do it anymore, but I haven't gotten a Happy Meal. It's been at least a couple weeks. It's been a while. So no, it's been a long time. But here's an example of one that they had years ago. New findings. It says fact. New findings show that birds are probably related to dinosaurs. Scientists in China have discovered 2 fossils of feathered dinosaurs. Anything jump out to you about that fact? Or probably. I love that. If you're going to give us a fact, give us a fact. New findings show that birds are probably related to dinosaurs. That's a fact. That's interesting to me. Scientists in China have discovered 2 fossils. They did discover fossils, and these fossils had these filaments that came out of them. And so they just decided to draw a picture from that. And that picture was this. This is what it looked like. And so here we have birds. And so they say dinosaurs evolved into birds. Now we talked, I believe it was last week, we got into a little bit of, or it was 2 weeks ago, to be fair, it was 2 weeks ago, we talked about the days of creation. What day of creation did God make land animals? Day 6. On what day did He create the birds and the fish? Day 5. Which came first, the birds or the land animals? The birds. So biblically, did dinosaurs evolve into birds? Absolutely not. Again, that contradicts the Bible. But yet they're teaching that in school, that these dinosaurs evolved into birds. And that's what they looked like. Right? There's so much more we could say about that. But I want to point this out, and then I want to get into the evidence, and I'll slow down here. Philip Kitcher, renowned atheist, a quote I gave you several months ago. He said, if you could prove that man and dinosaurs walked together, if you could prove that they coexisted at any point in Earth's history, you would shake the foundations of evolutionary theory. So much of evolution rides on the fact that there's that much time between men and dinosaurs, and the fact that dinosaurs did evolve into these birds. It's this huge time period for evolution to take place. And so if you can prove that we existed at one point with dinosaurs, then you're going to really gut punch, if you will, evolutionary theory. All right, let's talk about, I'm going to revisit 2 of the main ones that I mentioned before, and some of you weren't here, so this will be new for you. And then I'm going to bring in some new information a little bit later. There is a park, Natural Bridges National Monument in Utah. Anybody ever been there by any chance? I don't think I've ever I've done this particular section of the lesson a couple of different places, and I've never seen anybody raise their hand, but I think it would be neat to go there. There are some folks from Apologetics Press that did go there and took some photos for us. Kyle Butt and Eric Lyons, I'm sure you're familiar with those names. But anyways, at this particular monument, there are lots of interesting things to see. And at this point that you see pictured is the bottom or the lower part of Kachina Bridge. There are several bridges there that are very famous. Kachina Bridge is one of the largest natural bridges in the United States. And that Kachina Bridge, at the bottom, there are what they call petroglyphs. The Anasazi Indians, centuries ago, wrote and depicted different pictures and petroglyphs, as they call them, on these clay and rock formations. What you see circled there is a petroglyph that has been of very much great interest to those tourists and those who have been coming by. Let me zoom in a little bit here. We're going to pretend we were just walking up to this. Now, you can't see that, I don't imagine. You just kind of see right now a rock formation. What I'm going to do, because this is PowerPoint, and I'm glad we actually have a better system now, so hopefully this will be even better for you to see. But what I'm going to do is, I tried to highlight this, and I'm going to kind of fade it in so that you can see it. And now you'll know where your eyes need to look, and then I'm going to fade it back out so that you can kind of see what's going on. Here is the petroglyph that is of great interest. If you can see that. Now, what does that look like to you? Does that look like anything that you know of outside of a dinosaur? I don't remember if I told you this or not, but they had talked to the tourist lady, the lady that's selling the tickets to the park, and they mentioned this particular petroglyph to her, and they asked her, what do people say that this is? And she explained to them, they want to avoid this. They don't want to talk about it because it's, the creationists like to call it a dinosaur. She said, but Kyle asked her, well, what do they say that it is? And she said, well, most people believe it's a horse. Most people believe it's a horse. Anybody have horses? We grew up around horses. I'm sure many of you did too. They didn't look like that. They absolutely did not look like that. And by the way, birth defects is an understatement, isn't it? By the way, in fact, the Anasazi Indians are dated to have done this around 700 to 1200 AD, 1200 being the absolute most recent. When did horses even enter America?
When did people come into America?
When did horses? Well,
North America.
Yeah, the Spanish, 15th century, that's right. Very, very end of the 15th century. Horses weren't even here during the time of the Anasazi Indians. They didn't see a horse, they didn't know what it looked like. Horses were not in America. And certainly if they were, if they called that a horse, it wasn't the horses we know of today. It was much different. Let me kind of fade this back out so you know where to look now and can kind of see, hopefully see it pretty well. I can kind of see it. I hope that you can as well, but be much better in person. But that is the depiction. Now, did the Anasazi Indians in 700 to 1200 AD, had they ever seen a fossil of a dinosaur? Is there any documentation that fossils of dinosaurs were found prior to 1822? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Especially not in America. That was over in Great Britain in 1822 when that happened. Certainly not the case. So how in the world could they have drawn such a perfect depiction of an animal we know as the Apatosaurus? How is that possible? What would you say, just logically? Had to have seen them, right? I mean, is that too irrational to conclude that they must have seen a creature like this? You know what's very interesting to me is about 45 miles from this location, there is a museum. And the museum, I should have wrote it down, the name just left me, but there's a museum. You can look this up, and I encourage you to do so. But in this museum, one of the great artifacts, if you will, or fossils in that museum is an Apatosaurus hip bone, a fossil that they found right there in that location. They built the museum where they found that fossil. Very interesting. You see a fossil 45 miles from this location of an animal, interesting enough, that they drew between 700 and 1200 AD. Are you seeing the evidence? We're not just making this up. This is what they drew. I'm going to give you another picture here. This is, again, difficult to see. To the bottom right is what I just showed you. We zoomed out a little bit, and that bottom right circle is that dinosaur. Up to the upper left of that is a man. And so depicted there, what they drew was a man and a dinosaur side by side. I think that's very, very interesting. Now, could this have been faked? Could somebody have just done this recently maybe and just kind of fooled everybody? Is that a possibility? It's possible, but here's some evidence that we have. Dennis Slifer, who is an expert, a professional at petroglyphs. This is what he does. He loves Anasazi Indian history. Here's what he wrote about this. At the base of Kachina Bridge are approximately 100 elements, both petroglyphs and pictographs, dating from AD 700 to 1250 AD. These include a series of red handprints, a large red butterfly-like figure, spirals, bighorn sheep, snake-like meandering lines, and a white pictograph of a chain-like design, and some geometric petroglyphs. And by the way, you can see all of those photos that he just mentioned. You can look all this up online. He goes on to say, one of the most curious designs is a petroglyph that resembles a dinosaur, which is apparently Anasazi origin based on its patination. What he's basically saying there in his expert terms is, because of the patination, because of the white film that has layered itself over centuries over this picture, this was not something recently done. This is not faked. Anasazi Indians, from the best experts that we know, we recognize that Anasazi Indians drew these pictures. Nobody debates that. And they drew them between 700 and 1250 AD, best that we know. This was not recent. This is what they drew. What in the world would have caused them to have drawn that? He says apparently it's Anasazi origin. You can't debate that. because of that patination. Very, very interesting. Anybody have any thoughts on this particular one? Has anybody seen this before? Okay, good. Some of you have. This is another one that I showed you before. I want to show you one more depiction that is a picture, and then I want to show you something different. But Cambodia, around 1181 AD, they've dated this particular temple. There's a lot of these temples that were erected, but most of them have been torn down, but a few of them have been left that you can go and still visit and see, including this one called Ta Prohm Temple. Ta Prohm Temple, as you picture there, you see that little red arrow at the bottom? I didn't do that one. That was already in the picture, but it was just right because they're pointing at something that is of great interest and has been to tourists for years. As we zoom in, this is a column that was created and designed depicting many different animals. And that one that was highlighted red, this is the one that you see there. What does that look like to you? It looks like a dinosaur, doesn't it? In particular, which dinosaur? What do we call it? Not the Brontosaurus. Stegosaurus. Stegosaurus. Brontosaurus is interesting because it's depicted as the long neck one, but the Brontosaurus never existed. It's actually, we call it that anyways, and it's stuck, but it actually never existed. They messed up in putting a head on the wrong body. It's actually the Apatosaurus, but Brontosaurus was just so kind of popular, I guess, it just stuck with us, and so we still call it that. But nonetheless, just as a side note there, since that got brought up, Stegosaurus is the one that looks like here. It's got the plates on the back, that had to do with the sun and protecting its body. Now, looking at that picture, what would you think the skeptics might say about that picture to say that's not a Stegosaurus? What would you think?
I think they would say it's
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like a hippopotamus. They actually do. It's not the hippo, at least I haven't heard of that one being mentioned. They think this is a river hog with bushes behind it. That's what they say. Or this is a river hog with bushes behind it. All right, again, and a lot of times when you see Stegosaurus drawn, how big is the head in relation to its body? The way we normally draw it. It's a little head. It's a little head. And so they kind of argue that here too. That's a pretty big head, so that can't be a Stegosaurus. That's why I said at the beginning, we're drawing these dinosaurs the way we think that they looked, but we just don't really know. But again, here's another possibility, and this one's probably not as strong as the other one, not quite as clear cut. Maybe it's a hog with bushes behind it, but it sure does look like the fossilized Stegosaurus as we know it.
This may be the one that was mentioned to Joe.
Oh, it's a possibility. Absolutely. Absolutely a possibility. We're going to talk about that one.
Was a water animal.
We're going to talk about that one too, actually.
Okay.
Both of them. Time permitting, that is. All right, let's go to something that I know I have not discussed with you before. Anybody ever heard of the Ankambaro figures? This is not very popularly brought up. I don't know why. It's very good evidence, in my opinion. Very interesting.
You make some of this stuff up.
I do. I just make it up. Nobody goes and checks it, so I can just make it up. And yeah. I actually have a dinosaur at home right now in my backyard. I've got all the evidence I need. I couldn't go that far. But I can use these big words and make you think this is real. No, this is absolutely true. You can take this to the bank. Look it up. Ankambaro figure. I dropped a few notes down here, jotted a few down because this guy's name I knew I wouldn't remember. In July of 1944, Waldemar Gilreath, I hope I'm saying that right, was riding across El Toro Mountain. It's called the Bull Mountain more commonly. And he saw some figures in the dirt. He was up at a very high elevation and he looked down a bit and he saw some things sticking up. Now he had archaeological experience. He was very knowledgeable of that, and so he began to carefully dig, and he pulled up something that looked like a figurine. He ended up going and talking with a farmer that lived not too far away, and together they worked out a deal to excavate this area. And over 33,500 of these Ankambaro, it's called this because it was in Ankambaro, Mexico, figures were found. 33,000 of these that were created. And they don't know exactly what civilization, who it was that created them, but they date these figures back to 2500 BC, best that they can tell. But here's some of the...
Were they carvings or were they...
They were made of clay and jade.
Okay.
Yep, they were made of clay and jade. They were figures that people kind of like pottery that they had made out of clay and jade, as I remember it. Ancambaro, Mexico. Here's some of the pictures of the ones that they excavated. Not real easy to see, but you can kind of see some of the one in the back at the top there kind of looks like what we would maybe call a Tyrannosaurus Rex, Stegosaurus, similar at the bottom right there. Lots of interesting ones. There's what do you call the Triceratops, the big-headed one there at the bottom left. A lot of the ways that we see these often depicted, these figurines were made so many years ago. Here's another one, maybe a little better to see. Let you look at that one for a second. And some of these we haven't drawn. Some of these we haven't necessarily put together in this way, but very interesting. Especially, you think of, it reminds me of kind of some of the Asian things and the dragons, the legends and myths about dragons and things like that may not be so much of legends. I love this one. This one's depicted of a little man that's kind of almost hugging one. And one particular archaeologist said it made him think that they may have had creatures like this as pets that they would have loved and cared for. Yeah, right. He said it would have been a baby dinosaur, by the way, if I'm quoting him. Baby dinosaurs. And hey, there are people that have lions as pets. I see it on Facebook all the time, and more power to them. I don't believe I'll have any, but one more that I want to show you, and several of these were depicted, but I picked this particular one as, now why he had a big horn on his head, I don't know. Maybe he thought he was cool, but pictured as a man riding there, a dinosaur that looks exactly like the Triceratops. There are lots of other places, lots of other paintings. I didn't show you every carving or every petroglyph that's been found, but lots of other places have pictures of man riding these creatures, dinosaurs. And here's a figure of one. Not the best looking guy there, is he? But very, very interesting.
I think it would be kind of unusual if someone had it as a pet and it got bigger and maybe they're
Yeah, could be. Could be. And by the way, speaking of that, some people ask, how could man have lived? How could man have lived if dinosaurs existed? How would you answer that?
Same way they lived with mammoths.
Okay, good. Same way they live with all these other large creatures, right?
That's right.
Absolutely.
They were
Right.
faster than dinosaurs. They could run away.
They could run. Yeah, they were fast. They could run. Again, most dinosaurs weren't massive like you see. There were big ones, certainly. Very, very large ones, but
Riding, that would be meat to feed a family or a small village, a tribe for several days.
absolutely. Never had dinosaur meat. Won't ever get to, but I'm sure some people did.
They probably did.
And again, what did God instill within all animals?
Fear of man.
Fear of men, with one exception. Anybody know what animal is the exception to that, biblically? I'll hold that thought. We'll get to that in a minute, and we'll show you. There's one example that he did not instill that fear in. But every other animal feared man, and that would have included these dinosaurs. All land animals certainly feared man. No exception there. Some other evidences. Again, these are just kind of different categories, and I'm showing you just the highlights of each, but because our time is so short. But footprints. We didn't talk about this one either in the past, and this is a great evidence. Footprints. Maybe you've heard of some of these recent findings even, but all of them that I'm going to show you, pretty much all the major footprint evidences, as they're calling them, are found in Glen Rose, Texas, near or around the Paluxy River. There is a lot of footprints of dinosaurs in that location, and with those dinosaur footprints are lots of human footprints. And it's interesting because they describe that the human footprints are in the same bedding plane with the dinosaur footprints. Why is that significant? That they're finding the human feet prints to be in the same bedding plane. What would that even mean?
They would have been there at the same time.
Yeah, at the same time. Same time. It's not different layers. It's right there with it. In fact, some of them, I'll show you a picture of one in a minute, have been a human footprint inside of a dinosaur footprint that would have happened while it was fairly fresh. The Taylor Trail is this first picture I'm going to show you. Around 1970 is when they depicted these particular pictures. This is the Taylor Trail footprints. Again, you can look these up if you want to jot that down. You can see the dinosaur footprints there, the ones that are going off to the right. And you can look this up and get a lot more info, but the human footprints and that man at the top there is kind of pretending like he's just doing it. But
That's in rock.
yes, I believe that is. It's some kind of rocky material. It's not obviously solid rock, but some kind of soil. One of the bedrocks down in they dug up. You can see the pictures. They took bulldozers and moved a lot of stuff, cleared off a lot of the upper layers of the Earth's surface there to get to these. And apparently in the around 1990 or so, there was a famine, and it really dried up a lot of the river, and so they found a lot more of these that are very clear, and I have a picture of one of those too. But here's one where a footprint, let's see if this laser will work for me, a human footprint is inside of a dinosaur footprint. If you can see that is the human footprint right there. If you can see that laser, and that is the three prong there of the dinosaur all around here. So yeah, exactly. So you've got the human footprint inside of the dinosaur footprint. Very, very interesting. Again, how do you fake that? How would you put that embedded like it is, almost fossilized? Here's one from after the drought. You can see how far down it is from the surface, and how they're on the same plane here. Man is standing at the end of the 500-foot extended trail, which totals 157 tracks. Dinosaur and human footprints. It's very, very, very interesting. Evidences these footprints. All right, let's go to the Bible. Any thoughts about any of those, or maybe something else that I've not mentioned that you know of, other evidences outside of that show that man and dinosaurs once coexisted? All right, let's go to the Bible and see what the Bible has to say about them. I want to start with the more familiar, probably, of the two animals that I believe to be dinosaurs. Job chapter 40. Job chapter 40. Let's begin in verse 15. Verse 15. Behold now, what's our next word there? What's this animal called? Behemoth. Does anybody have a version that says something else? Everybody says behemoth? Probably a lot of yours has some kind of subnote or footnote there, or maybe a reference note that would call it an elephant or a hippopotamus. No? Hippopotamus. That's a hard word to say. That's what they suppose this creature is, an elephant or a hippo. But let's read some of the facts about this animal. Behold now behemoth, which I have made with thee. Whatever this creature is, it was made along with Job, with man. He eateth grass as an ox. Lo now his strength is in his loins, and his force is in the navel of his belly. He moveth his tail like a cedar. The sinews of his stones are wrapped together. His bones are as strong pieces of brass. His bones are like bars of iron. He is the chief of the ways of God. He that made him can make his sword to approach unto him. Surely the mountains bring him forth food, where all the beasts of the field play. He lieth under the shady trees, in the covert of the reeds and fens. The shady trees cover him with their shadow. The willows of the brook compass him about. Behold, he drinketh up a river, and hasteth not. He trusteth that he can draw up Jordan into his mouth. He taketh it with his eyes. His nose pierceth through snares. Lots of facts about this creature. A lot of those facts are pretty normal and would fit a lot of the animals like the elephant or a hippopotamus. But what are some details maybe here that stand out to you as seeming to be just an ultimate power of a creature that would make it even maybe larger than an elephant or a hippopotamus?
Tail like a cedar.
Okay, good. A tail like a cedar. Tail like a cedar. We're going to come back to that one in a minute. What else? Anything else stand out to you? What does verse 21 indicate when it mentions that his shade comes from the trees? What do you think God's point is there? I mean, any animal can be shaded by trees, but what's God doing here in this context to Job? He's talking about how big this creature is. Look at this chief creature that I've made. He's chief of the land. This is the chief land creature, as it were, the biggest one I've made, apparently. Verse 21, when he references the trees being his shade, what's his point? Yeah, he's going to be, he's so large that the only option he has for shade is going to be that which is very tall, that which is stuff like these, like the trees, that's going to be able to cover him. And the covert, of course, of the reed and the fens. The shady trees cover him with their shadows. He drinketh up a river and hasteth not. Right? This is a massive, powerful creature. Some of this could be figurative language, some would say, and that's a possibility. But probably the strongest argument of all to get rid of the idea of an elephant or a hippo is definitely the fact that his tail moves like a cedar. Maybe some of you remember this, but look at that. I know that's not a beautiful picture there that you're seeing, but focus on the two very small things coming out the ears, the rears rather of these, not the ears, the rears of these animals. Either one of those tails look like a cedar to you?
No.
When the Bible, by the way, which often references in the Old Testament cedars, like the cedars of Lebanon, it's always a reference to something that is large and powerful. There's nothing large or powerful about those little tails. The creatures are very large and powerful, but not the tails. Those tails don't move like a cedar. What would be a creature that we know of, based on these fossils that we found, that would have potentially been the largest land animal to ever walk the earth? The dinosaur. And in particular, which one? We've already mentioned his name.
The one that used to be called Brontosaurus.
Is it? That's it. We call it the Brontosaurus. That's all right. The Apatosaurus. That is a big guy. That tree is depicted with the tree. That tail looks like it would move like a cedar tree. I like that particular artist depiction there. Certainly he would need the trees to shade him. But there's a lot of debate on that.
It talks about how big this guy is. He could stand to let the Jordan River run into his mouth.
That's pretty impressive. Hippo's got a big mouth. I mean, to be fair, he does. But boy, the tail like a cedar is hard to get around. It really is. The Apatosaurus, I don't know that for a fact that's what God was describing here, but I think there's much more evidence in that reading to suggest that it would have been one of these large dinosaurs and not something like a hippo or elephant. But to be fair, today the largest land animal is the what? Is the elephant. The elephant is the largest land animal. All right, now, what is the largest animal, period, to have ever lived and is still alive today? The whale. The whale, in particular, which one? The blue whale. Absolutely massive, massive creature. Nothing even comes close to comparing. But there is another creature in the Bible that is described, and it's certainly not a whale. Look at Job 41. Job chapter 41. Let's take a few minutes and talk about a creature that really, I don't know too many times has really been discussed. Not that I know that much about him either, but I know what the Bible says because we can read it. Look at verse 1. Canst thou draw out, what's the term this time? Leviathan. Canst thou draw out Leviathan with an hook, or his tongue with a cord which thou lettest down? Verse 2. Canst thou put an hook into his nose, or bore his jaw through with a thorn? What are the first two verses of chapter 41 indicate about this creature's whereabouts? Where does this creature dwell? It's in the seas. It's in the ocean. It's in the water, we know, because of the reference there to a hook, a fish. Fishing is the idea, of course. Will he make supplications unto thee? Verse 3. Will he speak soft words unto thee? Will he make a covenant with thee? Wilt thou take him for a servant forever? Right? Very rhetorical. Obviously not. Wilt thou play with him as with a bird? Wilt thou bind him for thy maidens? Shall your companions make a banquet of him? Shall they part him among the merchants? Can you fill his skin with barbed irons, or his head with fish spears? Lay thine hand upon him, remember the battle, do no more. This creature is unlike any creature we know of anywhere else, because he is literally described here as basically being impenetrable. Now, most would say that this animal is a what? Or an what, I should say. What are your Bibles? Anybody who maybe has the notes to the side, what do they call this creature? What animal? This monster. Yes, crocodile. An alligator or a crocodile is what most would describe this creature as being. For time's sake, I want to jump to a couple of verses here and bring out some points, because this is the entire chapter. And we don't have time, unfortunately, to go through every detail. But look at verse 25. I want you to think about an alligator. When he raiseth up himself, the mighty are afraid. By reason of breakings, they purify themselves. How many alligators you know that'll stand up on two legs to intimidate you? Have you ever seen one do that? They don't do that. Absolutely not. They don't raise up. In fact, of all the animals if there's any animal you wouldn't say raises up, it's an alligator. Why?
Tiny little legs.
Tiny little legs. There's not much height to an alligator at all. Or most reptiles don't have much height. Look at verse 34 along with that. He beholdeth all high things. He is king over the children of pride. I just don't think you could say that about an alligator. He beholdeth all high things. We behold more high things than an alligator does. Job could have laughed and said, God, you're talking about a creature that's not even as tall, not even close to as tall as I am. But he doesn't stand up like that. But what creature would? Let me show you something else about this creature. Verse 30. Sharp stones are under him. He spreadeth sharp pointed things among the mire. In other words, it's a reference to his under or his belly. The underside of this creature is very stony, sharp, very rough. Do you know anything about the alligator's belly? Very smooth, very soft. Alligators do not have stony stomachs. Now, their back, the scaly part of that alligator, those reptiles, absolutely, they're very tough. But his belly is not. But this creature's belly very much so is. There may be a lot of comparisons to the alligator and this creature, but it's no alligator. Verses 19 and 20, probably the most interesting and controversial part of this. Out of his mouth go burning lamps, and sparks of fire leap out. Out of his nostrils goeth smoke, as out of a seething pot or cauldron. Verse 31, he maketh the deep to boil like a pot. He maketh the sea like a pot of ointment. He maketh the path to shine after him. One would think the deep to be hoary. Upon earth there is not his like, who is made without what? Without fear. There is nothing else on the planet that has been created that does not have fear other than this creature. Very, very special animal. God made him impenetrable. It's a wonder, why do you think this creature was made by God to live in an ocean and not on land? What might happen if a bunch of these creatures roam the land that didn't fear? There might not be people. You want to talk about somebody wiping out human? It might be this creature. But God didn't put him on land. He put him in the ocean. He put him in the sea. All right, what stands out to you about those passages that just seems almost impossible, that skeptics would say there's no way an animal could do that? What does it say about this animal? What can it do with its mouth? What comes out of its mouth? Fire. This is a fire-breathing animal, or fire-breathing dragon, as some would call it. Did this just get made up, or is this Bible? Is it possible that a creature lived in the ocean that could spew fire out of its mouth? Do we really believe that?
That's what it says.
Of course we do, right? Of course we do. I want to put some animals up here. I was doing some research on this, and then I'm going to show you a picture to conclude this thought on Leviathan. Obviously, again, just like these other dinosaurs, this creature has never been found. It's supposed to be extinct like the rest of these dinosaurs are. But I want you to think about the possibility of a creature created by God being able to spew fire out of its mouth and it not kill itself in doing so. Take a few animals, for example. I put all these up there. And by the way, Psalm 104:26 mentions Leviathan around the ships. I forgot about that particular point. But let me put these pictures up here for you. This one, what is that animal? An eel. An eel. What do eels do that make them unique? Why would we choose an eel? Electric. They can produce 500 or 600 volts of electricity in a snap. Enough that would stun a full-grown horse to where it would just be paralyzed for a few seconds. So you've got a creature that will produce an electric shock or a spark, we might say. All right, well, combine that with a creature like this. Anybody ever seen the movie Finding Nemo? You seen that movie? You remember that angler? This is called an anglerfish. You remember that guy with a little light bulb out in front of him that swam around? That's a real fish. It's called the anglerfish. And his luminescent light there works just like a firefly. We could have also used the firefly. The ability to have this luminescence to them to light up a dark area. Very interesting. That's a depiction there, not an actual picture. They're very gross looking. I didn't find a picture that didn't just creep me out. Not that one's not kind of creepy anyways, but the real ones are even worse. But that's the anglerfish. So you've got a spark, you've got luminescence, there's your light, and then combine that with a creature like the Komodo dragon.
Right.
What do you know about a Komodo dragon?
That's some kind of bad dude.
It is some kind of bad dude. Komodo dragon is the largest living lizard alive today, and he has the ability to pack and store a lot of very, very toxic bacteria in his mouth. So much that if he bites a deer or some animal that he's wanting to eat, it will kill them. It takes some time, but that toxicity, that bacteria will kill that creature. But it does not cause him harm at all. The Komodo dragon is completely unharmed in His design by God. All of these should be showing us the design and creation of God as well, and that evidence therein. So you start to put these things together. You got a creature that has a very powerful weapon that doesn't hurt himself. You got a creature that can create quite a spark. You got a creature that can produce light or luminescence. What are we missing in this formula? We've got the spark, we've got the light, we've got the ability not to harm himself, but what do we need in order to create fire?
Something to burn.
Something that burns. We need gas, don't we? Anybody ever heard of the bombardier beetle? It's called the bombardier beetle for a reason, emphasis on the bomb. Because this little booger, and you can see as it's pictured there, produces 212 degree noxious gas and launches it in that liquid form out of its tail.
Wow.
212 degrees. It doesn't harm it, but it uses that. It'll spray it on its prey. You combine the abilities of these four creatures, and what do you have? You've got a guy who can launch some flames out of his mouth. If you can launch gas and create a spark at the same time, put a little light on it, yeah, it's going to, absolutely. Is it possible? Absolutely. We see God creating animals that had these abilities. Seems very logical and probable that He could have easily put them together. Yes, sir.
A few years ago, we had one of the guys here talking about this.
Yes.
He said that the dinosaur ate so much greens and all that it's possible that as he burped, he clicked his teeth and created a spark to cause the gas.
Interesting. Never heard that. I would imagine with the powerhouse jaws that they would have had, they absolutely could have done something like that. The T-Rex, for example, his jaw alone, he could bite down about 400 pounds of pressure in a single bite, if I'm remembering correctly. Very, that makes sense. I've never heard that before. In fact, this bombardier beetle picture came from a bunch of apologetics press. The bombardier beetles? That's a good question. They're outside. We're thankful for that, but I don't know where. Probably not in America. I would guess that he looks like he lives in Africa, but I don't know. That would be something worth looking up. You wouldn't find one in your backyard, we'll put it that way. Here's a creature. Now, this I had never even seen this until recently, and a young one let me borrow a book that he had, and this picture was there. And I did a little research on this, and we've never seen Leviathan, but this was a creature that was found in 1977, a Japanese fishing boat off the coast of New Zealand, and they pulled this up, this giant carcass that weighed, I believe it was over 4,000 pounds, if I'm not mistaken. Did I write that? No, I didn't, but I'm pretty sure that's right. About 4,000 pounds just of this raw carcass that they pulled up. Some said that it was a whale that had deteriorated, but the end of the story was they ended up calling this a sea monster. He unfortunately did not put it on his boat. I say unfortunately. Unfortunately for us, for him, I wouldn't have put it on my boat either, I don't think, but because it would have spoiled all the fish they did caught, and he couldn't do that. So they took a sample from his flesh and then some pictures. They dropped him back. So he's still in there, floating around somewhere, but they found him about 1,000 foot, it said, under the ocean surface. But that was 1977. A picture was taken. What is that creature? They don't know. To this day, we don't know what that creature is. They call him the Loch Ness Monster, maybe, or the sea monster is what they call him, but maybe that's something like Leviathan. Who knows? Very, very interesting. Any final thoughts, comments, or questions before we maybe open up one of these discussion questions? We move very quickly, but do you see evidence inside and outside of the Bible for the fact that men and dinosaurs coexisted? I mean, it seems like pretty strong evidence. Which of those, in your opinion, were probably the strongest evidence for man and dinosaurs coexisting? If you can leave here with the strongest evidence to show others around us, which one would it be? Footprints. Interesting. That was not what I expected you to say. Footprints. Very good. Okay. That's very strong evidence.
That's what I was going to say, because the drawings, I mean, it could have been a fantasy, like I was doodling and I drew.
That's a good point, yeah.
But how do you fake a footprint?
How do you fake a footprint? Excellent. Very good point. Footprints. Well, let's leave with that then. When you leave here, remember that. Remember those footprints and use that and show people that when you're trying to show them this about dinosaurs. Again, what is the targeted audience for this subject? Who do you think is targeted the most with the topic of dinosaurs? Young people. Absolutely young people. And again, what's the reason for that?
Raise a generation that believes in it.
That's it. You got the fact that raising them to believe that is going to, take care of the future of what they believe. Most likely, if it's going to be hard to convince them otherwise if they're, grounded in that. And also, children absolutely love this. They're very interested in it. And if they learn anything in school, it's dinosaurs. If they're going to go check out a book from the library, if they've got to read for AR points or whatever it is, it's going to be about dinosaurs if they can do it. It's just a very interesting.
Maybe some of the fish that your children did in Finding Nemo.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Now they're producing one with Finding Dory.
Finding Dory, that's right. And maybe they'll have another one like that. But those, you never know in those movies what you might learn. A lot of those are about animals and creatures that we didn't even know existed, but they do.
I might be wrong, but I've always thought that the flood took care of all of that and put it underwater, and that's why they're fossilized today.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of truth to that. Some ask, what happened to the dinosaurs? Why did they go extinct? And one of the, it's interesting, I didn't put the picture here this time. I believe I had it last time though, but there's a depiction an artist did. They believe that one of the reasons that there's so many fossilized dinosaurs, even standing upright, some of them, it's incredible how put together some of these have been that they found. And they believe the only way that could have happened was for them to have been covered very, very quickly. And a flood must have done that, they believe. They don't attribute it to the Noahic flood, interestingly, but they believe it must have been a flood.
Plus, there wasn't room on the ark.
Well, that's a good question, or a good point. How would they have got dinosaurs on the ark? Could they have fit a full-grown Apatosaurus on there? What would he have done?
Dozen eggs.
You put some eggs on there, couldn't you?
Just a great big chicken on it.
That's right. You could definitely put some eggs or some babies on there and bring them out. Certainly, after that flood and after the world changed, it was difficult for those animals to continue to live. But even at least up to 700 AD or 1181, Tapram Temple, if that one is a dinosaur, but at least 700 AD, the absolute earliest they can educatedly guess that the Anasazi Indians would have written that. Dinosaurs still walked the earth. Very, very neat and interesting. And those footprints, I forgot the date they found them was 1977. I'm not sure when they date those footprints. But they certainly do. Any other last-minute thoughts, concerns, questions, comments? I know I went quickly, and that was a lot of material, but I hope this is as interesting to you as it is to me, this particular topic. Again, next week, we will not meet. I don't want you to show up next week and forget. And that's right, and the door will be locked and you not get in. And, if y'all get together and want to chat, that's up to you, but I will not be here. But the week after that, I certainly will be, Lord willing, and we'll look forward to that. And that particular week, we're going to be addressing some things. I told you, covering some things that we did not discuss and things that I thought might come up. And so we're going to visit a few of those, such as global warming was brought up at one point. There were some questions about the resurrection, 3 days and 3 nights in the grave. Some difficulties with that, alleged contradiction. We're going to visit that one. And at least 3 of them, and the other one about the carbon dating. We're going to visit that a little bit more. I had some discussions with some about the carbon dating a little more, so we're going to revisit those and maybe some others. And basically what we're going to do is talk about some topics we didn't get to finish up in great detail and things that you had questions about. And so if you think of anything else in the next 2 weeks that you want to discuss, get that to me and we'll talk about them. And then at the end of the first week of June will be our last class, sadly. But thank you so much for being here. If there's nothing else, then certainly wish you the best and God to keep you in His care. And we will hopefully see you tomorrow at 7 o'clock for our Wednesday evening Bible study.